Welcome to the Best Life podcast. And today we've got my wonderful friend and colleague Emily on the line. So, welcome, Emily. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, you're so
And
welcome.
it's brilliant to have you here. Can you just introduce yourself and tell us a bit about you?
Wow. So my name is Emily Spillman. I run Halora Health in South Glos. We are a kind of multidisciplinary pelvic health clinic and gym. I suppose as my professional life, I worked as a nurse and still practice that in the kind of pelvic health sphere. But I also trained as a personal trainer just around lockdown time, as they always seem to happen. And yeah, in that time, I suppose over the last 5 years, 6 years actually, God, it's going,
Goes quick.
it's quick. I have been, I suppose, going down different avenues in my career. I've worked as a personal trainer in cancer centres. I currently work as a physical activity lead for a cancer charity. So very much my career is kind of a bit of a portfolio career now, sort of going through different uh, specialties. But the thing I love about that is that I've been able to kind of bring in my experience from women's health, as well as kind of long-term health conditions, and then kind of bringing in physical activity within that. And in that time, I have learned a huge amount that I probably did not learn in nursing school about people, about the human body, and yeah, and I think, when I was first starting out, that's how we met. So
Yeah.
that was that was great to kind of network with you at the time, and then obviously our friendship has grown since then. So
Yeah,
I'm
it's
very
been a
honoured to
long
be your
time.
I'm very honoured to be your first person.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure. So I guess we're both very passionate about health and social care, and particularly women's health and women's well-being. And the string that ties it all together is our sort of empathy and compassion for that group of people. Um, can you tell us about your own experiences of your caring responsibilities and how that links to your professional career?
Um, I weirdly, before I became a nurse, I didn't think I was that caring. But I was like, I was very like, didn't know whether I wanted to be a mum, and I was very much thinking about having a child-free life. I think we all go through that, don't we? Um, but actually, when I first started in my career, I wanted to be weirdly a chef or an architect or something creative.
Yeah, really different.
Yeah, really different. And then I think growing up, I left home quite early, so I had to care for myself first and foremost, which was a challenge but also eye-opening. And then when I trained to be a nurse, I really loved it. I really enjoyed. I was looking after a guy in the community. He was quadriplegic, and I think just having that responsibility and supporting someone, and having those relationships with people. And he used to be quite grumpy to the rest of his team, but he seemed to like me, and we got on like a house on fire, and having that kind of camaraderie that we used to have. And we'd go out for days out together, and in his wheelchair, and we'd spend ages doing his paperwork using his sort of his well, back then he used to sort of blow through a straw to move the mouse around the computer and stuff. It was really
Wow.
cool. um and yeah, I managed to do that job whilst also studying to be a nurse. And yeah, it was kind of the catalyst really for me doing my nursing degree. And in that time, I did lots of different placements. But once I'd qualified, I soon realised like there was like a huge gap in what I felt people needed and what we were providing. And I I suppose I'm quite a passionate person, so if I see an injustice, I get quite like sensitive to
Yeah,
it. So
we share that as well, I think we.
so I kind of, started my career in kind of cancer nursing, and that was fine. I think, for the first couple of years, that's, I really enjoyed that job because I really got to like look after my patients and see them for a long period of time. And then I had my son, and that first kind of, when you come back and you're like, right, I need a challenge
Yeah.
and I need a change. So I went to A&E, and that was a completely polar opposite to having patients for probably less than an hour to having people for weeks on end. So that dynamic did not work for me. And I soon thought, actually, that's not for me. And then I went into community nursing and I loved it. I really wanted to do practice nursing, but there weren't the right jobs at the time. So I did district nursing for a few years, and in that time, I love the practical side of it. I am a practical person, but I really saw like a lot of people kind of withering away and not being social. They're kind of, particularly with district nursing, we tend to go to people who are housebound. So, and I think seeing people in such poor health and well-being, and the catalyst for me realizing that what my kind of nursing education had provided me to care for people was very much task orientated. It was very much like, right, what dressing is going to be the most
Yeah.
appropriate for this leg ulcer? What is, I know that we'd speak about lifestyle and nutrition, exercise. So if I'm going to someone with diabetes, unfortunately, because of the time constraints and also the amount of pressure that's involved, it's really hard to have those conversations with people, even though you know that that is what's going to help.
Yeah.
And it got to a point where I think we get so wrapped up in our in the work that we've got to do that we often do forget the human at the end of that. And I remember a lady that had a relatively minor leg ulcer. She was independent at home. She must have been in her 80s. Her husband had died, and she was declining any bandaging for her leg ulcer, which is kind of the gold standard, to have a bit of compression if it's appropriate to your leg ulcer to help it heal. And she was declining it, and the nurses were coming back going, oh, can someone go in and sign non-disclosure, not a non-disclosure, non-concordant paperwork with this woman? And I was like, okay, well, I'll go in and see if I can talk around and, sort of speak to her. And she said to me, I said, oh, is there a reason why you don't want to have the bandaging? She said, well, because last time I had it, it was bandaged right from my foot, from my toes all the way up to my knee. I couldn't get my shoes on and I nearly fell over. And I don't want to end up with a broken hip and be like, I'm
Yeah. And more
independent, I can live at
complications.
home. Yeah, and all the
Yeah.
complications from that. And she was genuinely frightened. And I was like, that's such a valid reason.
Yeah.
And I said to her, I was like, well, there are other ways that we can support you with that. With bandaging. At the time we were exploring bandaging from the ankle up if it was appropriate, and or using wraps and things like that. And she was like, not too sure. So I said, look, I'll go and get what I've got in the car. Let's try some bits out. And let's see, what we can do. And she literally put the wrap on and she went upstairs. She got on the toilet on and off. She got in and out of bed. She was like, right, okay, I can manage
Yeah.
that. And she was happy to.
Just
And it
needed
healed
more
within a couple of
time.
weeks. She needed a bit more
Mm.
time, but she needed more information and more
Mm.
collaborative work. And I feel like we get very stuck in this like do to people because that is the quickest thing to do and we just need to get the job done, rather than having this kind of very human collaborative approach, which actually saved us a lot more time in the long run because we actually managed to then
Yeah.
heal her ulcer much quicker.
Yeah.
And her ability to self-manage that afterwards was higher as well. And again, the same for people with diabetes and things like that. Again, those conversations just weren't happening. And so that's what then triggered me to be a personal trainer, because I thought, well, if I can learn more about nutrition, if I can learn more about exercise, then I feel better as a nurse to be able to support people with that. So that's kind of the main driver for me doing that.
Yeah. Amazing. Wow. Thank you for your services. And I think, like you say, sometimes we can just go in all guns blazing, can't we? Sort of over medicalize things and try and be too task focused. I remember supporting this wonderful, wonderful woman. She was 62. She had an acquired brain injury. And at the time, she was 2 to 1 because she had threatened to commit suicide. But that was making her worse because she felt like she was being watched the whole time. So lo and behold, the family finally persuade the agency to try 1 to 1, and she stops feeling suicidal. She's not doesn't feel like she's being watched all the time in her own home. And we used to take her out on bike rides, and she felt like she could live again. The fact that she could actually leave the house because she only had one carer with her. It was such a simple fix, but without thinking outside the box sometimes and giving people those other options, like it
Yeah,
just becomes,
and I think also being able to support people how they want to be supported, and I think in healthcare, social care, we can be quite paternalistic and sort of say, well, this is what we think you should be doing, rather than actually what they want to do. And people are allowed to
yeah,
make seemingly unwise decisions, but ultimately, these people are adults. They've also got a massive life history that will, you know make them think differently to another person. So another person might be
mm,
absolutely fine with two people, but if someone else has got, kind of difficulties with groups of people, or like you say, just feeling like she's just being watched and overly supervised, it kind of can feel quite degrading as an adult as well,
yeah.
to do that. And I think that kind of human side gets a little bit lost when I know the safety and ensuring that we reduce adverse events from care is important, but I think we also should always think about the person at the heart of that as well.
And this responsibility of caring for people that we're so good at. We're
As
very
women,
good at
you say.
recognizing, what people want and how they want it, and the fact that, we should give choice. We want it to be dignified, probably because that's what we want when we're older, I expect, or I don't know, we've seen it done badly perhaps. But why do you think that responsibility falls to women so often?
Well, because we were conditioned to do it since we were little girls. So, and and it is really hard. I think, the tides are changing a little bit in terms of, I think women are more aware of actually that they've got more choice. But I think society is still expecting that. And I think even as a woman, when you try and make choices around, whether you want to be a mother, or whether actually don't want to care for, a family member who maybe hasn't been, the kind of family dynamics that can make, being around that person very difficult for your own mental health, I think there's lots of nuance, and there's lots of challenges that each individual person takes. But I still think there's this kind of expectation that
Yeah,
we should be doing it, and then we also are super hard on ourselves, because even though we're like, no, there should not be this expectation. Even when I go, no, my needs need to come first, even if it is just for a weekend. So I've just come away from having a completely I've had a weekend with no children, no husband, no dog. No one's needs were needed except my own. There's still that little niggling voice in the back of my head going, "Oh, you're such a terrible mum, such a terrible wife,"
yeah,
and I think it's that guilt that can really drive, or that shame, or that can really drive a lot of our behaviors. So I see
yeah,
that a lot of women, where we're kind of very people pleasing, because ultimately society is a bit harsher on us if we don't perform. There was a really I think a really cool study that was done around like women who they basically got people to go into a home that was run by a woman and run by a man, and if the home, and they rated it on terms of cleanliness, and then rated like the man and the woman, and women were scored much more harshly for having an untidy home compared to men.
yeah, I can believe it.
So, so it's not in our head that, when we've got people coming round and we're going, oh my God, I've got to make sure everything's tidy, blah, blah, blah," and the man's going like, oh, why are you so worried about it for? It's like, because actually there is, we are harshly judged
Yeah,
on that compared to our male peers.
yeah,
There is a reason why we do feel that, and we need to feel accepted in society to feel safe. We are group animals, as much as we don't like to think of ourselves that way. We need to have that kind of collective safety, and so yeah, women do that. And I think, I see it so much in so I do small group personal training only for women in my gym in Wicklow, and you know most of our time is talking about the amount of responsibilities we have, the kind of mental load is a huge theme that we often talk about here. And it's just really nice to be able to talk about it openly, I think, without feeling
Mm,
judged by others.
yeah.
Because I think, I think as women, we do feel bad for moaning about it. But at the same time, I don't, unless we all acknowledge that the mental load can have a huge impact on our health long term. But unfortunately, our society and healthcare system doesn't necessarily listen. And I think that's where, for a lot of women, they get quite frustrated and ill, essentially. Women spend more time in an older age more ill than their husbands. Yes, they live a little bit longer, but they live a lot more in kind of what we call with more comorbidities than men. And I think it is just because we're just bloody exhausted.
Yeah.
And if you're sleep deprived, you're chronically stressed, you're not able to move your body very well, your muscle mass starts to decline as you get older. You know, I think our immune systems just don't get as strong and resilient. And so, it's no coincidence that majority of people who suffer with autoimmune diseases are women. And unfortunately, a lot of our symptoms around heart attacks make us more kind of at risk of having complications of heart disease compared to men,
Yeah, they're harder
because
to
we're
spot, aren't they, in women as well? Like all the general signs that we are all taught about are actually male signs.
yeah, but I think ultimately when you go to your healthcare provider and you're talking about all the things that you're experiencing and your symptoms, yes, they can be explained with lack of sleep, stress of being a mum, having children, or looking after parents, dogs, friends, mental health and well-being. You know, making sure your kids have got the right stuff for school. Like making sure that their mental health as well in a world where children's mental health is being impacted by our sort of social lives online and things. But I think rather than dismissing women and going, oh, it's probably that, I think we should be asking a different question about, like, yes, what's your blood pressure, what's your cholesterol level, all those things are important, but so is asking that woman, like, how much caring responsibility do you have? Because I do believe that is a huge conversation in terms of women's risk factors. And if someone is saying
Mm,
to you, look, I am running multiple things at once, I'm doing other things, it's not to say like, oh, poor you, maybe you should just take a bit of a rest and have a bottle of wine to like get, to sort of chill out and relax. Is going, actually, that is a risk factor for other health
yeah,
conditions. So if
yeah,
that woman is coming in saying, I've got these symptoms, I can actually take that woman seriously, because that is that is a huge driver for ill health. So
yeah.
and women need real solutions to that. And some of them can be supported with our own self-care. But again, I don't really like this term self-care, because a lot of our health is determined by our environment and the society that we live in. So, there has to be huge systemic changes, in our system that is actually going to help improve that for women, you know, um,
This is it.
because,
And
yeah,
I saw a
there's a
study
huge,
recently that actually women are spending more time with their children compared to, 20 years ago. Perhaps because we are following our careers and we're living further away from family and family support, but there is also that societal pressure, not to put children into after school clubs, because they'll be too tired, or I don't know, not to ask for help, not to have a cleaner. That you feel guilty for having a cleaner or guilty for having a dog walker. We should be able
yeah.
to do it all, but we just need to feel less guilt about having help. Like, if you can afford it, go for it. Get that dog walker.
Yeah, for sure. Because I I don't know what it is, because I am a recovering perfectionist. So I I am terrible for asking for help. But I do think that there's this kind of need to be very independent, and I get that. But things work so much better when you work as a team. So, and
Yeah.
you can do your best work when you haven't got to do the work of every other thing. Like, I never, I run my own business, I have a job, I have children. You know, my husband is great. Like, I think here, I'm not here to bash men at all, because I do think, you know, there are some good eggs, and they have to. Women are working now. They're not just staying at home looking after children anymore. And even when, like you were saying, that like entertaining your kids, that study was like done with women who were in the 1950s who didn't have a job. They'd stay at home, they'd cook, they
Exactly.
clean, they do everything, that the kind of household stuff, and the kids were out playing all day, because
Yeah.
the
You just didn't
perception of
see them.
threat, you know, you just didn't see them. I didn't in the 90s and early noughties. You know, I was out all day. I was climbing trees. I was playing with Meccano. I was, you know, I was quite creative. I'd often just do some creative stuff. But unfortunately, I think, you know, as parents nowadays, you know, a lot of people, I think the average person is working two jobs, not just one, just for the cost of
Yeah.
living, running two jobs. And then you've got to add in looking after parents if they're getting older, that sandwich generation. So I work with a lot of kind of like midlifers, maybe a little bit earlier than midlife. And, you know, looking after children and managing all of those things, I don't think that's realistic of anyone, to be honest. And I'm not surprised that a lot of people are burning out. And I do really worry for our generation, because I think the amount of expectation of that kind of very independent, I need to do everything right, have the career, have the kids, and then
Yeah.
thinking about, you know, what is going to happen when my mum needs care, who lives 150 miles down the road.
Mm.
You know, and we're not very good, I think, as a society for planning ahead like that. You know, people die, people get ill, and we don't plan ahead for those things. We just sort of ignore it and think it's never going to happen. But unfortunately, it is. Uh,
Yeah.
and also, social care isn't paying for good level care anymore. And because of all the cuts systemically that we're seeing across our society. So yeah, I am worried for the future of that, because I think, yeah, it's not going to be easy. And I think then
Yeah.
having to give up your career to look after people, I think that's going to be even harder, because our sense of identity around that is going to be sort of, yeah, flipped potentially overnight for some people, if they've, you know, got to care
And
for
I think
someone, if
you
they've
and I
suddenly
would
become
both
ill.
struggle with that.
Yeah, for sure. Because, you know, or even financially, because like I don't have savings, you know, like I don't, you know, I have a nice home, I have a nice life, but I don't have savings. So, you know, you know, I think everyone is pretty much on the next thing to, you know, I suppose, having a big event that could potentially mean that they have to make difficult choices.
Yeah.
Yeah, and looking after people. I think it's a shame, because I think women, particularly in that the gap with health, but also finances, women I think are about 35% less, or go to their pension 35% less than men, because they're not able to contribute as much, because they have more time off work for caring responsibility. And I'm pretty sure that all of women's unpaid labour equates to the same amount as what another NHS would cost.
Yeah. Insane, isn't it?
Like another
Absolutely
NHS.
insane.
It's like billions of pounds.
Mm.
If women just stop doing unpaid labour,
Yeah.
um, is insane. So society relies on it, unfortunately. Um,
Yeah.
and uh, and then you have an industry that likes to then sell women all the things that are wrong with them. So then that's another full-time job, just looking after your face,
Yeah.
and you know, your hormones and everything else that everyone likes to tell is wrong. So it's a full-time job.
Oh, keeps us busy, doesn't it? Goodness. So we've spoken about the responsibilities tending to fall to women. Have becoming a mother, have any of these sort of responsibilities affected the opportunities you've gone after, or within your career? Have you changed your path because of your caring responsibilities?
Yeah, actually, it's really timely. I think this is why I was like, I want to come on your podcast, because I I am actually currently in a state of flux, mainly because I've got a 10-year-old and a 3-year-old. My 10-year-old will be starting secondary school next year. You know, I've been running my business now for 5 years. It's doing really well. I work part-time for a charity, but all of that work and responsibility just in work alone, and you know, the jobs that I do, I'm working with people who are ill, who are struggling with life, and you've got to have quite a lot of resilience in the tank to support people on an emotional level, and that can really fatigue you. Let alone your own health issues as well, sort of compiling that.
Yeah.
And I took a really brave step because I've, like I said, I've sort of talked a little bit about my early career. Um, but I've worked really hard to try and do things differently. I do not, um, you know, I want to change the world. I want to have an impact on the
You
world.
are. You are
Uh,
changing the world.
but thank you. But at the same time, I also see the consequences of that on my family. My son is he was born prematurely. He's had lots of health issues since he was born. He's thriving in lots of areas of his life. But there are other areas that we are really struggling with as parents. And I just feel that I just can't, I have to prioritize my child's health. I have to
Yeah.
prioritize my health, and I have to practice what I preach. I cannot say to women, right, you need to prioritize yourself when I'm not doing that myself. And I took a huge, like my job at the cancer charity, you know, I've been working on a project, going above and beyond for this project. And I'm really sad actually that I've decided to leave at a point when it could have a real like positive impact on my career moving forward. But I know that deep down I have to let go of something, and the one thing I can't let go of is the business that I've built because of what it provides me. It provides me with flexibility to work around my family. It's work that I really love. So I want to still be able to have that. I don't want to just sort of, just do a job just for the sake of doing it, as much as my husband keeps telling me I should do. But it's not in me to do that. I cannot shut off. I am a sensitive person. I love, I don't know. I just like trying new things, and I think, yeah, you're only on this planet once. And so, yeah, so I think making difficult choices like that, I think it's always me that has to do that, because ultimately my husband is the person who earns more money in the house. And so like nothing changes for him, which I also really struggle with sometimes, because I think that's very reflective of most households. And I know there are women who earn more than their husbands, and they have that dynamic, and everyone's individual kind of households are unique to them. And I don't think there's any kind of one size that fits all that works. But I am kind of envious of, kind of the work that he does and the amount he's paid for doing that compared to what I've done in the NHS and private work. The amount of effort and work that goes into that. It
Yeah.
isn't necessarily valued, I feel, in terms of salaries,
Mm.
and the kind of emotional impact it can have on us. And I feel like we're very vulnerable to being burnt out, and so therefore we have to change and sort of meet our family's needs where they are at the time. And I'm sure something else will come up in it that will suit my needs to support myself and my ambitions, as well as being able to support my family. But I would say, yeah, for sure, being a mum has definitely impacted my, I think, my ability to earn to a degree, to earn money, um, rather than the opportunities. Because I do feel, alongside my own personality, I feel like actually I'm quite proud of the career that I've created so far. It's very unique, but I am proud of that. But it is taking its toll, and I'm having to, yeah, make difficult choices at the moment that, yeah, I'm finding very hard, because ultimately the people in my family are more important than my career.
And what fantastic kids you're bringing up as well. They're amazing.
They are, they are, they are special.
They're very confident little cherubs.
They are too confident at times.
And so beyond all these changes to your schedules, has that affected your identity, do you feel?
I think the biggest thing that I've really struggled with is, I think a lot of caring roles, particularly things like nursing, where you are kind of this, it's a little bit like The Handmaid's Tale, isn't it? It's like, not The Handmaid's Tale, but you're kind of just this like handmaiden, and you do lots of tasks within your role, and you kind of feel all the people that you not physically, you feel all of the like trauma and the stress of the people that you are caring for, and all of um the I suppose suffering that they're going through. I think as women we can really feel that.
Yeah.
And I think leaving the NHS originally, that had a real shift in my identity, going like, who am I? What am I as a nurse? What skills can I provide to this new role that I'm creating for myself, where I'm kind of using kind of more lifestyle medicine as well as that kind of nurse. And that is pumped into us in nursing school, but it's just not done in practice, or it's not recognized. And so I've done a lot of work in trying to reframe that, because I think, a lot of my career has really influenced how I care for people now. But it just looks very slightly different, and being a bit more pragmatic about how we support people physically and emotionally. And exercise is um, can be such an amazing tool, but exercise also has a lot of, unfortunately, the industry is very much driven around women's like aesthetics, rather than actually the long-term benefits it can provide us in terms of feeling strong and capable and independent, and reducing our risk
Yeah.
of hip fractures and heart attacks and dementia, which we're all at risk of. Women are absolutely more at risk of getting osteoporosis and having hip fractures. We're more at risk of, having incontinence after, having babies, which also then drives a lot of falls in the elderly. So I'm really passionate about making sure that we're preventing this, because it's not fair, because we do so much for society. We should be looked after a bit better.
Yeah. You would hope so, wouldn't you? And so all these changes that we've gone through as women, obviously that starts to impact our health, as you've spoken about. Can you give any sort of anecdotes around how you feel it's affected your health?
What, being a nurse, like as a carer as
Yeah.
such? I Like I've already mentioned, like, I think, having to support people emotionally, um, can take its toll on you. And I think, I, I, when I was in nursing school, they were saying like, don't get too attached. Don't, they used to say that to me. And I feel connection is such a underutilized s- tool that health professionals can use, because we know that being connected with others, even if it is your healthcare professional, um, can really help improve our health. And I would say that being someone who cares for people, whether that is my family or people in my work, the the connections that I've created because of my work, I would say, has really had a positive impact. So I'm not going to necessarily speak about I think I've spoken enough about the negative impact of that, but I think we also have to look at the other side of the coin as well. And that
Yeah.
I have I get to see amazing women come into my clinic and into the gym every single week. It's almost kind of like medicinal, being surrounded by women, and and working with men as well, and just having that connection and being really open and relatable, not being this kind of paternalistic person saying you need to do this and you need to do that, is going actually like what, helping people to understand their own strengths and weaknesses, to help them move forward with their life, and making choices about their care, about how they show up in the world, how they show up for themselves, how they show up for their kids. We are very, we're not, I don't like to say we're complex, we have lots of different needs, and I don't think all of those needs are always supported very well.
Yeah. Well, not only
And
that, we're catering to a lot of other people's needs. So maybe it's not that we're complicated, it's the
yeah,
situations are complicated.
yeah, for sure. And I think if we recognize that better, particularly when we're supporting people's health, and that's including my own health, is that we have to show compassion is such a underutilized tool as well. I think compassion has been honestly life-saving, I think, for myself, not only from a body image perspective, but from, looking after my children when maybe when my business hasn't been doing so well. Compassion has been such a great tool for me in terms of supporting myself and having a different script in my head about what the situation is. Because sometimes we can't always change the bigger systemic things in that day. Hopefully they will in the future. But in the here and now, having a practice of compassion has really, really helped me to get out of that spiral of negativity and um, that can drive a
Yeah.
lot of suffering in us, I feel. That internal monologue can be quite self-destructive, and I see that in a lot of my clients as well. And I've got a really, just, it's just we do it by default as humans. It's our self-preservation brain trying to keep us safe. But I think sometimes it can have a huge impact on us if it's unchecked. And I think for anyone who's navigating um, any kind of caring responsibility, whether that is looking after your children, looking after your parents, there are going to be days where you absolutely hate it. I think it's absolutely okay to say that I don't always enjoy being a mother, or I don't always enjoy, if I was looking after my parents. It's, I know we can always say like there's always someone else worse off than me, or, I'm really lucky and all these things, but that doesn't really acknowledge the feelings that we have. And I think acknowledging feelings are really important, whether they're negative or positive.
Yeah.
So, and that just helps us to just feel the feelings and then just move on. And yeah, and I can really empathize. I think being a mum, or having looked after people, I know you work with a lot of people with dementia. That is tough, man. So,
Yeah.
having compassion for oneself um can go a long
And patience in tons. And that brings us so neatly onto mindset. So, how have you managed your mindset and also supported your clients' mindset previously?
um I think communication is so important. I think we can easily just go like, it's just easier to do it myself. That can then compile a lot of the responsibility on yourself. And I completely understand why women do that, because it's very difficult to have difficult conversations with the people that we care about without them getting defensive, or, or it causing more problems than that we just don't have time for. I completely get that. Uh, I see too many women just swallow it down, and I think it has quite a profound impact on our health, more than we realize, when we just kind of don't deal with that problem. We don't deal with the problem. Um, and obviously, I'm not here to say to anyone, like, when you go home, just have a really good conversation, because that person that you live with might not necessarily be a safe person to have that conversation with. But I think, particularly from a mindset perspective, I think we can definitely talk about the problems for sure, and having the space to do that, like we've already discussed. But I still think there should be dialogue between the people in our lives to support us better, to be able to thrive ourselves. Um, and I think also to take away that kind of perfectionism. If it doesn't get done, it doesn't get done. And that's
Yeah.
okay. If you need to get a cleaner to help you clean so that you can have a career, then that's fine. You have the finances to do that, great. But if you don't, is there someone else in that house who can do that as well?
Yeah.
And, and I think, unfortunately, the kind of other partner being at work all day and then not having the headspace to be able to deal with chores, needs, taking, kids to the clubs and all the other things, they can't get away with it anymore because women are working as well, uh, albeit part-time. But so many part-time jobs. I genuinely believe like so many of us are doing part-time work, getting paid part-time, but full-time output. And so I do feel that there needs to be a bit more of a shift in terms of like the responsibilities. And I know that's not an easy thing to do. It's taken me a long time to have those very difficult conversations. And even still, there's still always that like, oh, I did this. And it's like, well done
Yeah.
you. um,
Yeah.
um, like,
One
it's
thing,
like,
one tool we've been using is AI to try and dish up the chores more fairly. So one thing I typed into AI the other day was, imagine my household is a business. These are the jobs that this person does. These are the jobs that this person does. How can we more equally share these jobs? This person is good at this. This other person is good at this, and it will just give you a solution. I was
yeah,
flabbergasted. I managed to hand over about three other responsibilities.
yeah.
They've now
But
fallen back to me since then. But
yeah, yeah, yeah. But equally, I don't think it's I think we all have our strengths as individuals as well,
yeah,
you know, whether we're man or a woman, or anything in between. I think we have to play to our strengths, and laundry is not one of mine. so, uh, so you know, no one would have clean clothes if it was left to me. So you know, there's definitely tasks that I do well, and there's tasks that my husband does well. And so therefore, we don't need to look at the different roles, whether they're pink or blue jobs. I think
no,
there's, you know, I think that's kind of on its head nowadays. But I think you know, and I there's certain jobs that my husband does, and I think, oh, I wish I could just do that. But unfortunately, it does, you know, like mowing the lawn. I'd love to go mow the lawn, like just to have like time where no one's allowed outside while you're mowing the lawn. So, you know, like whereas I feel like when you do other tasks in that we tend to do, there's always like something running around you, or you're going to step on the dog, or you know, whereas the blue jobs I feel are more isolating away from your you know, like the like doing the car, or you know, unless you are very good at getting the kids involved, which can equally be very nice as well in learning some like life skills. But I do feel some of the roles are undervalued. But something that I'm really actually quite chuffed about is that my son is really, really passionate about cooking.
oh,
He That's his like thing. He, you know, goes to a cookery club, and it's run by a guy, which I think is just such a nice role model for him to
brilliant.
learn that skill, and it's not just you know, a sort of women making tea. And I know that, you know, our generation is definitely men, you know,
There's a
do cook as
huge
well.
shift coming, isn't there? Like I think
Yeah,
about,
for sure.
my granddad. He didn't do any household chores, but my husband does probably more than half. It's definitely coming. Things are changing.
Yeah, yeah. Because I've, you know, when I grew up, I was, you know, my granddad was the same. He worked nights. He'd do, you know, he'd build everything himself, like the garden bits and here and there. But, you know, my nan did all the other stuff. You know, cook dinner. But I think it's the underappreciate. I don't think it's necessarily the task that's the issue. I think it's the underappreciation.
Yeah.
That can be quite a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. Because I remember, I'm sure I saw a post once where it was like, oh my God, the most amazing man is like literally a average woman. And if he's got hobbies, like wow. So I think there is definitely a difference in what's valued, I think, as women. I think caring responsibilities just are innately undervalued, but they have such a
Yeah.
huge toll emotionally, and
Mm.
this is why there's just a huge gap. I think there's an amazing lady who does a lot of work around the sort of female health gap and the sort of motherhood penalty or caring penalty, and she was chatting about like how bin men are paid more than like teaching assistants. And you know, her argument was that like, yes, okay, bin men is a dangerous job, you could get run over, you could probably have your arm mauled off by some machinery, but I'm sure it's much safer than it was years ago, because us the health and safety exec would be having a paddy. But you know, but you know, school environments are not easygoing. You know, teaching assistants are experiencing a lot of like abuse and like physical abuse as well, and emotional abuse, and the emotional toil of knowing that children are not being are not don't have the environment to support their learning a lot of the time, or their
Yeah.
mental well-being, and to say that that should be paid less than that is, I think, again, it's a very nuanced conversation, but I think it's a shame that it's so undervalued,
Yeah.
particularly those sorts of roles. And I think that's why, in the NHS, as healthcare professionals, as teacher professionals, we're all kind of a bit burnt out because we're kind of sick of not being, yeah, I suppose not
Supported.
being supported, or and being acknowledged. Acknowledgement is so important for our well-being, more than people realize. It's not that you just want to be, like, oh, thank you. Generally, knowing that what you're doing is being appreciated goes a long, long way. Even though you're helping people's lives, being appreciated for it at the same time is also is a huge motivator
Yeah.
to doing that, and to your long-term happiness as well.
Yes, exactly. I think the Swedish government have got some good ideas up their sleeves, but the ins and outs of those, I'm sure we'll talk about another time.
Yeah, but
But to you, what does genuine support look like for people that have got caring responsibilities? What might help us, or what has helped you in the past?
I think connection is where it needs to be. Like connection, social groups, not being isolated, not feeling that you have to give your absolute all
Yeah.
to an individual or your children, and not being able to spend time with other people, I think can be really damaging to our health.
Hmm.
Like I think there was a recent study around how having social interactions, connection, can be just as much of um, a driver of longevity than looking at people's cholesterol levels. So we are social creatures. There's no getting away from that, and our lives are changing because of technology, because of AI. I think we really have to get back to the basics. Good sleep, eating well enough, with the time constraints and the money that you have,
Yeah.
having, seeing your girlfriends, seeing your boyfriends, seeing, being around people who understand what it's like, in your position can be really, really helpful. Doing hobbies, if being active is something that you really want to do, well, do it in a social context. It doesn't have to be at the gym on your own. It doesn't have to look like that to be beneficial. Getting out for a walk with your dog, and meeting other people. That's what a lot of people do. They go out and they see other people who own a dog, and they stand and chat. And
Yeah. God, I wouldn't have half the friends I had if I didn't have a dog.
I know, but
None of
it's
them are
like,
my age either. They're all like older than me.
but I love that intergenerational. I love having older friends. I would say
Yeah.
about 50% of my friends are over the age of 50, 60.
Yeah.
I just love their where they're at in their lives. And yeah, they've still got challenges. And they're navigating parents dying or being ill, and yeah, it's just a good reminder sometimes
Yeah.
of um
The
the
need for
short
community.
yeah, the need for community, the need for um just having a conversation with someone on a deeply human level.
Yeah.
It's not superficial, and that is what makes me happy. I
Yeah.
was with a group of friends on Friday night, and I genuinely felt like really emotional, going like, "Oh, these are like amazing women that I've like got as friends," and we're just resting. Like, who does that? Who does that? Like, I feel like as a millennial, I'm like, who am I? I'm just like,
Yeah.
an ideal night for me is literally just laying down on the floor, having some like zero alcohol, and yeah, just having deep conversations and
Yeah.
about
Sounds dreamy.
life and the world. And so, I think, yeah, don't underestimate the power of good connections and friends. And if you don't have friends, like I'd like to, like my nan's been that typical housewife throughout her life, had part-time jobs, 2 girls, very kind of, you know, typical gender roles in the house. And my granddad died probably about 6 years ago now. And my nan's had friends here and there, but she's been quite dictated to by him in terms of what she can do. He was quite controlling.
Yeah, tricky.
And since he's died, and we miss him deeply, but at the same time, I've never seen her so happy and like it's almost like her wings have been clipped a little bit, unclipped, sorry. And she's just like always out and about with her girlfriend. She gets out and about and does stuff. And I know she gets a little bit lonely at home, but like, I'm so glad that she has those connections now. Because I genuinely believe she
Yeah,
didn't have them, she would be a lot sicker. She lives with rheumatoid arthritis, so she has to manage that. But yeah, I've never seen her so active and just getting out and do things. And she told me
yeah.
she went to a Pilates class last week. She used to come to my online stuff,
Amazing.
but she's, I went to Pilates, and I was like, oh, that's amazing. She's like, yeah, so I loved it. It was so good.
Wow.
So I think, don't always feel like you're too old to like start new things and have a different direction. I think, there's countless examples of people sort of just changing something up just to try and improve their health. And I do think, yeah, having good friends and good connections is a great way to support us through
Yeah.
challenging times in our life.
And trying something new, lot to be said.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And
You're welcome.
yeah, Emily's over at, do you say Halora? Halora
Halora.
House?
Yeah. So
Halora
yeah,
House.
Halora Health. Yeah. So supporting you holistically for all the different chapters of your life. So
Yeah. And what a
that's what it
fantastic
stands
job you
for.
do.
Lush. Thank you
Brilliant.
so much, Em.
Yeah. Well, I'll catch you very soon, I'm sure.
Yeah,
And if
yeah.
you want to catch us on our next podcast episode, then tune back in. We'll have another fantastic guest. And it's been amazing having you all on here. So see you
You're
very soon.
welcome. Mwah. Take care, bye.
Bye.
Hun.